Annuities are polarizing. I know you know that now, if for no other reason than because you've heard my story. I was blindly in favor of them for a brief time, very brief time at the beginning of my career, and then I grew to dislike them more and more due to my experience with the limited options to which I had access. I spent almost a decade actively pointing people away from them after that point, all the way to where I am today. Let's say, enlightened? No, that's dumb. I just finally found some that work, some that make sense to me no matter how I look at them. I finally buckled down and dove deep into their inner workings, even if my initial motivation for that was so that I could stop losing investment clients. Anyway, you'll find all sorts of opinions online. There are admittedly plenty of advisors in favor of them who have no idea what they're talking about. Like an uncomfortably large number fall into this category. They couldn't care less. They see only the dollar signs. On the other end of the spectrum though, there are plenty of advisors who were like I was, wearing the nobility of avoiding the commission as a badge of honor. They use the fact that annuities are admittedly complex, at least difficult to understand for anyone not willing to dedicate some time to understand them, as you are. They used that perceived complexity to push you towards strategies that will make them money. Like Fisher Investments does with their marketing, ultimately pushing you into a market-based portfolio for which they get to charge you a more than 1% annual fee. Of course, they don't want you to put that $1 million into that annuity. That's $10,000 a year and growing in fees that they might otherwise be able to collect from you. So you have to take it all from both sides, and you should, even for me, with a grain of salt. You'll have to think about it for yourself, educate yourself, and come to an informed conclusion. Again, you're here, so you're obviously already doing that. So let's consider all the negatives you might run into out there. Now, I'll try my best to not miss any, and if I do, please let me know in the comments. I can supplement this lesson later as needed. I am looking for the truth, what is in the absolute best interest for myself and my clients. So if you honestly believe I am missing something, I would greatly appreciate you pointing that out to me. When you look around online for negatives regarding fixed index annuities, you might find something like the following list. Or this is really a compilation of all the lists I could find and plus some of my own. 1, they're difficult to understand, complicated. 2, they can have high fees. 3, they pay high commissions. 4, their growth potential can be limited. 5, they're difficult to exit given their expensive surrender charges that can sometimes last for more than a decade. 6, their tax treatment can be confusing with both positives and negatives. 7, their guarantees are tied to the full faith and credit of a single company. And finally, number 8, one that I haven't really seen online, but that is a very real negative about which we should be aware, is the fact that their crediting options can be adjusted over the years. I sincerely believe the first 4 here are misleading. At least the way many advisors use them without context. They are not legitimate reasons to just blanketly avoid annuities altogether. There are, of course, also some very real negatives/concerns you should consider. As with any place you can put your money, even your checking account, which is extremely vulnerable to inflation risk. Of course, that doesn't mean we don't have one. It's just to say we need to be aware and plan accordingly. So we'll definitely dive into the very real risks associated with the final 4 negatives here. That way you can make a fully informed decision about your unique situation. Now, as far as that first one goes, they are not that difficult to understand. They certainly are not too difficult for you, no matter how financially illiterate you may otherwise feel, to fully comprehend. It is admittedly difficult to piece it all together given all the conflicting information out there. In fact, that's where I found myself, a practicing certified financial planning fiduciary professional with more than a decade of experience. I explained it all in this video. And that's why I took the time to put together our at the time of this recording, free Understanding Annuities course to guide our clients through it all so they would be able to understand it, and then so they would have a comprehensive resource to come back to if they ever had questions again. You can learn more about the course in the description below. Long story short, if this is one of your concerns, it shouldn't be. By the end of the course, which isn't even that long, I bet you'll understand these things better than most practicing professionals or otherwise financial experts. For the second issue, yes, they can have high fees. That's one of the things you need to watch for and weigh accordingly. That being said, that is not always the case. There are many that have no fees at all. Those are some of my favorites. The reason it can still make sense for an annuity company to structure it that way is the same reason it can make financial sense for a bank to offer higher rates for a CD, a certificate of deposit. Because of that surrender period, they're able to realize higher returns than they otherwise would be, which can be a profitable agreement for both you and the bank, or in the case of an annuity, for both you and the annuity company. Bottom line with this one, fees are something of which you need to be aware, but they are not a reason to avoid annuities altogether. In fact, there are countless with no fees at all. Number 3. Yes, annuities are known for paying high commissions, and that used to really bother me. But then I spent months of my life diving deep into the many options out there, trying my best to fully understand them inside and out so that I could know if they actually did make sense or not. And then I spent several more months creating content like this, trying to help walk people through these relatively complex instruments so they could make truly informed decisions. And now maybe I have a better understanding of why insurance companies pay relatively high commissions to help get the word out. Because there's a lot going on. They require more time for that honest agent to actually understand all their options, and more time still to help their clients through it all. First of all, this should not be a concern for you since you're not the one paying it. This is just a scare tactic of either the uninformed or of those who would rather have you consider and pay them for their financial advice. It's one or the other. Follow the money here and who's paying whom. You put your money into an annuity, and the annuity company pays a commission to your agent, or you invest your money in the market and you pay an ongoing fee to your advisor. Now, of course, high commissions can send up red flags. That's why it works as a scare tactic. It did for me. I was among those uninformed for like a decade. It's funny, really, when you think about how much some advisors will throw a fit about annuity commissions. A $1 million annuity might pay $50,000 in commissions and have a lockup period for 10 years. What if instead you invested that $1 million with the financial advisor who is blindly telling you to avoid all annuities? What does he charge for his services? At least 1%, many more than that. An annual 1% of $1 million over 10 years is $100,000, twice that commission. And that's if they're a terrible advisor and your money doesn't even grow. By that point, you would have ended up paying them more. Again, this is just so important. That latter scenario is you paying that $100,000 plus dollars. Whereas with the annuity, you are out of pocket $0. Number 4. The concerns about growth potential being limited. I used to be concerned with that. I am not anymore. Now, they certainly can be limited, but you need to know what to watch for. The participation rates, the caps, the spreads. I break that all down for you in that course. And we'll surely explore all that here on this channel at some point probably as well. But that's a decent sized rabbit hole to go down. Bottom line here is they don't have to be limited. But check this out. Fisher Investments uses this extremely misleading chart to prove this point. The light blue line here is supposed to be the historical performance of a hypothetical fixed index annuity versus the stock and bond markets. I mean, sure, if that blue line is all the growth you could hope for from the annuity you're considering, yeah, I agree with Fisher. Stay away from that one. But if you look at the fine print here, this hypothetical is assuming a 5% cap on your annual growth. Well, yeah, what would you expect if you're capped at 5%? But who would actually get something like that? Probably not someone who's been informed of all their options. As I said, this is a rabbit hole for another time, a deep dive we do in that course. But just so you know, there are annuity options that are tied to the market and can be entirely uncapped. In fact, their participation rates can even be higher than 100%. So yeah, I think misleading charts like this one could be used to teach a lesson in due diligence. But it certainly is not an accurate representation of what is possible with a sound fixed index annuity. Because yeah, these days there are viable options that are specifically designed for accumulation, for growth. Companies that have stripped out all the bells and whistles and left us with some super attractive FIAs with 0% downside and surprisingly high upside potential. Fisher specifically, when referring to the biggest negative, says that the true cost is the opportunity cost. As in what you're missing out by not investing in that stock and bond only portfolio the industry loves. If you've read my book, Stop Investing Like They Tell You, or watched other videos on this channel like this playlist, you probably know more about the dangers and risks associated with that mainstream paradigm than a Fisher advisor, than most mainstream advisors actually, sadly. Most people find themselves here. I found myself here because I was searching for a way to eliminate or at least minimize as many of those risks as possible. And that's the opportunity cost Fisher is concerned about. They want you to be entirely in the market, entirely exposed to those risks. Once again, I digress. But hopefully at this point, these first four negatives don't really alarm you. They are important to be aware of, but they are in no way a reason to avoid annuities altogether. 1, they do not have to be difficult to understand. 2, there are many options with no fees whatsoever. 3, commissions paid do not come out of your pocket. So as long as you understand how the insurance company is able to legitimately make that work, you should be good. And 4, their growth potential is not always limited. So now let's dive into the real negatives. The money you have in a checking account or even under your mattress is exposed to inflation risk. Real estate, business, the stock market, the bond market even are all exposed to drawdown risk, potentially all at the same time. Every place where you could choose to put your money has some risks. It's important to understand what those are, compare them to the benefits, the rewards, and make an informed decision based on your unique financial situation and goals. So let's dive into those next 4 negatives, those that have more merit than the previous 4. Number 5. Yes, other than the 5 to 7% free withdrawal amount that you can get to about every year, they are difficult to exit. They can have long lockup periods and high surrender charges. As we talked about earlier, and as we explore thoroughly in the course, it's these restrictions that make it to where annuity companies are able to do what they're guaranteeing to do, and often without charging any fee, similar to what makes CDs work for you, potentially, and a bank, except on steroids. It makes sense then why the best FIAs often have such long surrender periods and high charges. Without that predictability, annuity companies would certainly not be able to make the same guarantees. Of course, that doesn't mean that longer lockups and higher charges equal better contracts. Of course not, that's not what I'm saying. There are so many terrible annuity offerings out there that unscrupulous salespeople are just slinging, that yes, have long surrender periods and high charges, that if you get stuck in one because you didn't do your due diligence, you are going to want out. You need to be aware of how these strategies fit into your overarching financial plan, how FIAs could replace bonds in your portfolio, for example. You also need to do your due diligence on the particular annuity for which you're signing up. You do not want to get locked into a bad one. But there are good ones out there that need that predictability in order to do all those things I wanted to do for my financial plan. Bottom line for this concern is the surrender schedule does not inherently make annuities bad. It just means you have to know where it fits in your unique plan and do your due diligence, both of which we're trying to help you with in here. Number 6, the tax treatment can be confusing. There are some pros, like we talked about the tax deferral, and cons to consider. In general, I've found personally that the benefits from a sound fixed index annuity far outweigh any negative tax considerations here. The main tax critique is that although the growth is tax deferred for qualified withdrawals from your annuity, the gains are taxed as ordinary income. If this were a normal, non-qualified brokerage account, the gains could be taxed as capital gains if they were held long enough, which rate is often, historically, the lesser of those two types of taxation. Now, if the money in question for an initial annuity contribution is already in a tax-qualified vehicle, like an IRA or 401k, as these contributions very often are, then this is a moot point anyway, since all withdrawals from those qualified accounts are taxable as ordinary income regardless. The 7th I have listed here is that their guarantees are tied to the full faith and credit of a single company. That certainly can be a concern. I try to look at these things, all financial considerations, from every angle. It is absolutely possible for a single company to go under, no matter how sound it may be or appear to be. You see banks going under all the time, so why not an insurance company? Your money held at a bank, in a CD, or in your checking or savings account is backed by FDIC insurance. That provides savers with insurance should the bank go under. Unfortunately, that kind of insurance helps feed the very problem the government is trying to protect against here. By guaranteeing to backstop any bank that happens to go under and making sure that that's very public knowledge, this bank is FDIC insured, consumers most often resort to doing absolutely zero due diligence. The bank you choose to go with is rarely because you've researched how sound their investment portfolio is. And because there is not that natural free market check on their corporate governance, banks are able to go to greater lengths to get ahead. They're able to get away with taking greater risks. Nobody's not going to invest there just because their portfolio is invested in risky things. And more have to in order to compete with the other banks. In short, that's why we see so many fail. Annuity companies don't have that same crutch. If they want to attract clients, they need to have a viable product. They have to be able to prove their financial trustworthiness. Add to that insurance regulations are more strict than banking regulations. This high regulation leads to sounder financials. In fact, most of these annuity companies have reserve ratios over 100%, meaning they have more sitting in their general account than the amount they would have to pay all their clients, even if all those clients all decided to pull out all of their funds all at the same time. It's important to evaluate a company in this way. What is their reserve ratio? How risky is their underlying investment portfolio? Are they pushing the edge of what regulations will allow? Still not that risky. Or are they being even smarter with your money, even more conservative? What is their financial strength rating? Usually I'd like to see them over an A rating from the various rating agencies. But even then, that only means so much to me, a conversation for another time. Annuity companies rarely crash, especially large and established ones. I'm certainly not saying that they can't. They just historically don't very often. Many of the most viable options have been around for more than 100 years anyway. But there certainly can be mismanagement, especially as you evaluate smaller companies. So what would happen if an annuity company where you had an annuity went under? Well, the first line of defense is that individual states have insurance guarantee funds. That's why they're able to implement such strict regulations on the insurance companies. Similar to FDIC, it's just not federal, so the specifics in each state could be different, and they don't tend to advertise it quite as publicly as the FDIC does. But usually they'll guarantee up to a couple $100,000 in annuity benefits. But more than that, historically, in the rare instances when an insurance company does fail, other insurers have swooped in to pick up the pieces. Larger, healthier companies pick up the annuity contracts complete with all their guarantees in order to boost their own book of business. That's a quick way to add hundreds or thousands of new, grateful, and now likely fiercely loyal clients. So your annuity company going under is absolutely a theoretical possibility. So, although they are highly regulated and thus don't go under very often, like anything, you should do your due diligence. Sometimes, honestly, when the amount someone wants to contribute to an annuity is large enough, like close to or more than $1 million, we'll consider splitting it across a couple of different annuities from different reputable companies. But the planning considerations are still the most important part when I'm helping a client through this. It has to make sense for them and their unique financial situation. Because in almost all of the possible scenarios that I'm playing out in my mind, this is a relatively negligible risk. The final concern I've pointed to, one of the few here that I legitimately have for myself and my clients, is the fact that the insurance company's crediting options can be adjusted over the years. The crediting options are the factors that contribute to how a fixed index annuity grows. This is another aspect we cover in depth in the course and can in a separate video here if you're interested, but I think you can understand the risk without taking the time for a deep dive into that right now. Just know that if you're still curious after all this, that resource does exist for you. Again, at the time of this recording, entirely free. Anyway, the crediting options include the participation rate, in other words, the amount of exposure you're getting to a particular tracking index, the cap on an indexing option, things like that could impact the growth of your policy. It makes sense when you think about it. For example, most of them have a fixed rate option. Well, of course, that option is based on the current interest rates. As those change, that rate will change. The 150% participation rate exposure I'm able to get on a certain index is possible due to the way those options are being priced today. If they get more expensive in the future, that participation rate could adjust and probably should. Honestly, this is the only piece that troubles me. I can explain it away somewhat, and I will in a second. But in all sincerity, this is the one hole I've found for which I'm not sure there's a solution. But help me think about this from a financial planning perspective. If I can use a tool with its one relatively small issue by comparison to the market risks to which so many people are exposed, those that I talk about in my book, if I can use this tool to eliminate and minimize several larger issues, bigger risks in my opinion, shouldn't I? Of course, for me, I think so. But as with everything in the world of finance, you should run that cost-benefit analysis, weighing all the benefits and all the risks of doing something and the benefits and risks of not doing something to make an informed decision. My comfort in this concern is that most of the viable annuity companies that you'll be comparing have been around for more than a century. That doesn't necessarily make them good, but it does give us a track record. There are some companies in the space that have a reputation for quickly adjusting crediting options down after their annuities are sold. Of course, these companies are avoided by legitimate professionals, but are loved by slimy salesmen. Again, another reason for you or the financial planner you trust to perform due diligence. If they don't have a track record of dropping their crediting rates in the past, and they've been around for that long, there's no reason for me to believe they might unnecessarily do so in the future. So there you have it. Although in the grand scheme of all my financial planning considerations, this is a relatively small concern, it is the biggest concern I've found thus far with some of these annuity options out there today. As you've already learned by now, that's how my mind works. I want to be aware of any and all holes or potential holes in my and my clients' plans. As with anything you could do with your money, there are some negatives. The risk with your checking account and savings accounts is limited growth. Your account's not keeping up with inflation. With all your mainstream investment options, stocks, bonds, real estate, even your own business, the risk is downside risk, significant drawdown. With a well-designed annuity backed by a sound insurance company that fits properly in your overarching financial plan, the biggest risks I see, for the most part, are the lockup period and the crediting risk. I hope that clears up some misconceptions, but also leaves you with an awareness of the actual risks and things you should watch out for. If you think I missed anything, and I certainly may have, I hope you'll share. I'll see you in the comments. And I hope to see you inside the Comprehensive Understanding Annuities course as well. But regardless, thank you for being here. I wish you all the best. Take care.